recording. Good. All right. Since I don't have my external hard drive, I can't use an Eclipse unless I download and install the whole thing, today. So that's gonna hurt a little bit. But let's go ahead and answer your question, about setting. You want to change the name, but not the icon.
Yes.
Of your
want to
application.
update the view before it's displayed.
You want to update the view before it's displayed, and you're using the latest version. Your minimum version of Android SDK is 19 or 18 or so, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there. Okay. So now we have to look at. This is something that I really should talk about too, because we have actually seen this a few times already. Okay. The first question, or the first part, is what exactly is an activity? We talked about this already since the beginning of this class, because the activity is basically the screen. It's what is interactive with a user and what is also taking up the entire screen. Okay. When you use a minimum 8 SDK version of, I think, 11 to 13 or so, the activity is the only thing on your screen. There's nothing else. But when you specify a later version, then it starts to, an activity can now contain a fragment. So the question now is, what is a fragment to an activity? Are there any questions at this point about what is an activity versus what is a fragment? That's what we're going to talk about next. Question? Sure. No. Okay. So with an activity, the description of the activity class, which is used to model an actual activity, is a single focused thing that a user can do. Which is not a whole lot. This is really just saying that it is at the forend, or it can be at the forend. But what this is not telling you is is an activity takes up the entire screen. Okay. It is okay with earlier versions of Android because we only had small screen devices at a time. So it's okay to say that, okay, here's the entire thing. But it doesn't really work so well when we have a variety of devices. My transformer, my Asus transformer tablet, has a resolution of 1080p, which is a really, really high resolution screen, and it's only like about 7 or 8 inches wide. But having only one, if I have an application that was designed or tested on a smaller device, and it works exactly the same way on a high resolution device, it's not going to be making very good use of the resources on a high resolution device. Is that making any sense? So it's not exactly something that you want to do either. On the other hand, if I write an application for the high resolution device and design the screen accordingly with all the buttons and whatnot on the same screen, it's not going to work well for a smaller device, like on a cell phone, right? Is that making sense so far? So that's why just having an activity to represent the quote-unquote screen that you'll be interacting with is no longer the best way to do it. Okay? Because it locks down everything and say that, okay, you can only have these buttons on the same screen regardless of the resolution of your device. And that's why the concept of a fragment was introduced in later versions of Android. So for the second part, we want to look at the concept of fragments. Because the first thing we want to do is to establish the relationship between a fragment and an activity. A fragment represents a behavior or a portion of user interface in an activity. Okay, so this is interesting because it means that a fragment is inside an activity. It is a subpart of an activity. So what this is doing is you can have what they call a multi-pane user interface. You can combine multiple fragments into a single activity to build a multi-pane user interface and reuse a fragment in multiple activities. Okay, so what this means is if you have a large device, so let's say the green box here is representing a large device, then you can have the multiple fragments in the same activity. So each box, okay, let me use a different color to represent the fragments. So in this one, I have this fragment 1, fragment 2, and also fragment 3. So 1, 2, and 3. But because the device is large enough, I can display fragments 1, 2, and 3 all inside the same activity in the same container. On a smaller device, let's say this is my cell phone, which is a lot smaller. Even though it may still have the same resolution of 1080p, I cannot really see the details when it is displaying if it's just scaling everything to display smaller. So in this case, I have one single activity, and it only contains one fragment here. And by using a tab at the top, I can choose between fragments 1, 2, and 3, because I can just slide the fragments or use a tab to control which fragment that I want to interact with at that time. Is that making any sense? So fragment 1, 2, and 3 in this case, they're not really being displayed at the same time, but you can kind of imagine that they are kind of like overlapping. So only one can be the active fragment at any particular time. The next question is, do you think you have to write a code to manage, oh, okay, this is a bigger screen, we'll have these 3 on the same pane, and this one is a smaller screen, we can only display one at a time. How much is your code, how much is it up to your code to control which one to display, and how much is up to the Android framework to help you, to choose between, okay, you have a large device, let's display this way, you have a smaller device, let's display in the other way. Some of you might have seen that option or that particular ability inside Eclipse. When you design an activity in Eclipse, do you see that there's a little tab, a little drop-down box that allows you to select the resolution of the device? That is how you can specify and say, if I have a large device like this one, this is how I want to lay out the panes or the fragments. If I have a smaller device, this is how I want to do it. But the Android framework itself already has an ability to do this. So that this allows you to write one single application and be able to install that one single application onto multiple devices, and depending on the how much screen size you have on the device, it will still be able to display itself correctly without a whole lot of code from your perspective. Are we doing okay so far in terms of the concept and also the rationale behind fragments inside an activity? Okay. Now onCreate applies to which one? Does it apply to a fragment or does it apply to an activity? Well, let's take a look. Now I'm on the page of fragments right now. The first thing you want to do, with any type of classes, is to find out, its class, inheritance hierarchy. So in this case, it is, well, this is a guide. It's not going to talk about the actual class. So I'm going to click on fragment itself and actually look at the class inheritance. So when you look at the class inheritance, a fragment is directly derived from an object, which means a fragment is not an activity. Okay, whatever method and class member that is defined inside an activity, a fragment does not automatically inherit those because it's not a subclass of an activity. If I switch back to activity and you look at the class hierarchy, it is really quite, has a lot of inheritance. It is inherited from the context, and the context thing has to do with that it can be run by a thread. There's a thread allocated to an activity. It can be associated with a thread. Remember what a thread was? Thread is, when we talked about what a thread is? A thread is basically a worker, okay? Because you can write a program, you can write any code you want, but until you have a thread associated with that code, it doesn't do a single thing because there's no worker to follow the instruction to do anything. So a context simply means that it has a worker, or it is supposed to have a worker associated with it. So an activity usually has a thread associated with it. An activity is the one that has the onCreate method. Okay, so when you look at the onCreate method of an activity and look at the description here, this is where you initialize your activity. Most importantly, here you will usually call setContentView with a layout resource defining your user interface and using findViewById to retrieve the widgets in that user interface that you need to interact with programmatically. That is actually not entirely true. Some of you probably still remember in the past, I would say 1 or 2 classes, we tried to do exactly that. We tried to use findViewById inside onCreate, and it was not successful. I mean, if you still kind of vaguely remember that. Okay, I was bumbling through, in class, trying to find, a particular resource ID, and it's not working. It makes sense though, because now your buttons and whatnot, let me choose a third color to represent the actual interface, components. My buttons, okay, my text box, and my checkboxes are no longer inside the activity itself. It is inside a fragment, and a fragment is inside the activity. So that's why it's not working, because findViewById, by the time I get to onCreate, the fragments have not been created yet. And as a result, there's no button associated with this activity at the time when onCreate is called. So let's go ahead and read this part here. OnCreate is a callback method, just like the other type of callback methods, like onClick, okay, is another one. In other words, this is a subroutine where you can override it, and it doesn't get called until the framework, this Android system framework, decides, okay, we are almost done here, and somebody, post a message and say that, okay, we are created. Let me check with the class and see if there's anything special to do when, the activity is created. That's when it is called. Called when the activity is starting. This is where most initialization should go. Calling setContentView to inflate the activity's user interface. Using findViewById to programmatically interact with widgets in the user interface. Call manage_query, blah, 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 blah. But it's not going to work until everything is done. And when you have fragments, the fragment is responsible to load the buttons and whatnot. And as a result, findViewById does not work here, but instead it will work inside the fragment. Are there any questions at this point? Questions? So when you look at a fragment, the description of a fragment, it is a piece of an application's user interface or behavior that can be placed in an activity. So this is becoming a component inside an activity. The interaction with fragments is done through Fragment Manager, which can be obtained via activity get fragment manager and fragment get fragment manager. So it is common in both classes. You can get to the fragment manager in both an activity or the fragment itself. The fragment class can be used in many ways to achieve a wide variety of results. In its core, it represents a particular operation or interface that is running with a larger activity. A fragment is closely tied to the activity it is in and cannot be used apart from one. Okay, but it is not one. Okay, so the key point here is a fragment is not an activity, it is a component inside an activity. Now that is significant because what it is saying is, when we talk about classes in an object-oriented programming class, there are 2 ways classes can relate to each other. One is inheritance. Okay, so let's just kind of look at the basic concepts of how classes can relate to each other. So if you have class A here, and you define class B to be a subclass of class A. So we'll have, we'll just specify the syntax here. We say class B extends A, and then we have just curly braces, blah blah blah, whatever is inside. What this means is class B is a class A. If an object is of class B, it is automatically of class A because of inheritance. Are we doing okay so far with that concept? And the way you look at that is class A is really kind of a part of class B, because whatever B has, B contains whatever A has already. So this is what we call a is-a relationship. Is that okay? Okay. When we look at the relationship between an activity versus its fragments, it is not the same, because in that case we have a class A, but then we have class B. Now these are objects of class A and an object of class B. So now you have components of class B being we have two objects of class B being components of one object of class A. So that's a completely different type of relationship. Are we doing okay so far? This one means class B is a component of class A, but it is not a subclass thereof. So a fragment is a component of an activity, or can be, depending on which API you use. The other part you also should kind of pay attention is this is added in API level 11. So if you specify the minimum version to be 11 inside Eclipse, that's when it will start to incorporate the use of a fragment. But if you try to use API level 9, I think that's the recommended one, because most devices, I think they calculate like 95% of devices, can be covered if you specify level 9 as the minimum API level. Then it does not include fragment, and as a result, Eclipse does not make use of fragment if you specify a minimum API level of 9, but when you specify 11, it will start to use fragments. Are we still doing okay so far with that concept? Yep.
And relating to this, I set the minimum to be 14.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's well past 11.
Yeah, it's Android 4.0 and target of 18, 4.3.
Mm-hmm.
And no fragments were automatically created.
It did not create any fragments.
No.
So when you look at the layout, it does not have fragments. That might have to do with that backward compatibility kind of thing too. But let's go ahead and read through this and find out. Though fragments define its own life cycle, that life cycle is dependent on its activity. If the activity is stopped, no fragment inside it can be started. If the activity is destroyed, all fragments will be destroyed. Because a fragment is a component inside an activity, and that's why if the activity is basically gone, then the fragments will be gone as well. All subclasses of fragment must include a public empty constructor. The framework will often re-instantiate a fragment class when needed. In particular, during state restore, and needs to be able to find this constructor to initiate it. Older platforms. Developer guide. For more information about using fragments, see the fragments developer guide, which is this one over here. We can go back to that one when we need to. When Fragment API was introduced in Honeycomb, a version of the API is also available for use on older platforms through fragment activity lifecycle on attach. It has its own on create call. And I think I wrote one sample program to make use of fragments, and I think the initialization was done through one of the callback functions. Let's take a look at that one, see if I can find it. And I'm pretty sure it's this one. listeners. All right. So this one does make use of fragments, and the fragment is imported through the support version 4 class, package. And in here, my initializations were done using onCreateView. That's when I start to create or associate, what the buttons are supposed to do with the buttons. I specify the on-click method, on-click listener, when I'm in this particular subroutine. So getting back to the notes here. Okay, onCreate, inside a fragment is called to do initial creation of a fragment. This is called after onAttach and before onCreateView. Note that this can be called while the fragment's activity is still in the process of being created. As such, you cannot rely on things such as the fragment's content view hierarchy being initialized at this point, and that's why I do not link the buttons with their listeners in this call, but in the other one. The other one is onCreateView, which is a different call. OnCreateView is called to have the fragment instantiate its user interface view. This is optional, and non-graphical fragments can return null. So that's why this is the one that I use to create or to link the buttons to their on-click listeners. But back to your question, of when to specify or where to specify the options for your action bar. It cannot be inside the fragment because the fragments do not know about the action bar. The action bar belongs to the activity itself. So when we go back to the activity, let's scroll all the way back up here. Okay, so you use this call to retrieve the action bar, and then inside, once you retrieve the action bar, you can set all the different options, but it doesn't take effect until it just displays briefly on screen and then it disappears.
Yes.
Okay, so for people who kind of came a little bit late, let me just kind of explain what the issue was, and you can correct me if I understood it incorrectly. Tristan was trying to write an application to set up the action bar, in a way, like you want to preserve the name of the application on the action bar, but not the icon. You want to get rid of the icon, which is something that you can do with an action bar. And you link that code inside the onCreate method of the activity.
Yes.
So even though it was done, it displayed the icon briefly on screen and then it disappeared. In other words, it's the result of setting the icon of the action bar was not immediate. Okay. So let's take a look at the action bar and find out do you remember which call you were using to reset the to clear the icon?
Okay. Yes, I have a get action bar, set logo.
Okay. Set logo. Okay.
Then I just give it a color, android.r.color.transparent.
Okay. Which one do you use? Do you use the first one? Do you use a resource ID? Okay. Okay. Set the logo display in the home section of the action bar. The action bar will use a logo specified by its style or the activity logo by default. Whether the home section shows an icon or logo is controlled by the display option, display use logo. So that's the one that you specify. Basically, you do not use this option. Is that how you make the logo disappear? But there are also two options here. Set display use logo enabled. You can specify false over here. So I'm assuming that will basically not use the logo for that particular action bar.
I've played around with those different options, but they don't behave like you would normally think, because there's the icon and logo are two. I think there are two different meanings to them. So, so I say logo enabled false. The icon still is there.
Okay, but the other part, is it doesn't take into effect until after it is displayed on screen. So that means when onCreate is called, maybe at that time did you try to set up a breakpoint and basically stop at that point and see if the action bar is already displayed during the onCreate call?
Well, I have it right here.
I'm suspecting that's the case.
But I have not actually put a breakpoint there to see visually.
I'm suspecting that's the case. Basically the activity is already displayed on screen along with the action bar. And then onCreate is where you want to attach the code to inflate what is inside the layout. So that's why if you had buttons inside that thing, when you set up a breakpoint at the beginning of onCreate, it would not have the buttons displayed yet because the layout is not inflated yet at that point. So that means when we look at Android activity, there has to be another callback method that you can attach your code to, so the effect on the action bar will be effective before the activity itself is displayed. All right, so let's find out which method, which callback we can use in that case. Activity launched. Well, onCreate is the first one, so maybe there's something. Okay, let's see. onCreate, the entire lifetime of an activity happens between the first call to onCreate through a single final call to onDestroy. The visible lifespan of an activity happens between a call to onStart until a corresponding call to onStop. And those are in between. So onStart is after onCreate. So onCreate is as soon as possible. It is before the activity is displayed.
Okay.
So if you set up a breakpoint in onCreate, it should not have displayed anything yet.
Yeah, I can show it to you right now.
Okay. But then the other part, this is also linking, what we are talking about today with stuff that we talked about before the break. What was the focus before the break? Say again? Threads and the message loop, right? Okay. So with the concept of a message loop, what do you think set logo is going to do? Okay, let me go back to the set logo action bar, set logo, okay, it set the logo to display in the home section of the action bar, blah, 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 blah. So if you specify anything here, when do you think it will take into effect? Right away, or do you think it will take a little bit of time? It will take a little bit of time because only one thing can be done with the activity. Okay? So that means when you make this call, it's not going to do anything right away. Instead, it's basically just putting a message in the queue and say, we'll get to it when we get to it. And it just so happens that when you get to it, it's already past the time that it is displayed. Because I think you have to, go ahead.
Yeah, I made a screenshot. So yes, it loads, completely blank, no option. Then this is what it normally sees, and it quickly switches over to the activity to be displayed.
Okay. So when you single step through this, but that action bar already had the logo.
Yes.
Okay.
So it initializes with it, displays it,
Mm-hmm.
then everything gets populated.
Okay.
But during that time, you can see it there for a fraction of a second, then it disappears.
But the bottom line is when onCreate is called, the action bar is already visible on screen. So we have to either catch it a little bit earlier, or inside Eclipse there may be a way to specify inside Eclipse to specify the action bar properties of the action bar, not to display. That's it. Okay, so if you look at action bar, does everybody understand what the issue was or what the issue is at this point? Okay, all right. So the question is, how are we going to fix this problem? Because by the time onCreate of an activity is called, the action bar is already visible. So that's why if you want to do anything with the action bar, the end user will still see a blink, a flash of the original action bar before your code makes any changes to the action bar itself. So the only option that I can think of is to use the XML file to control that. Removing the action bar, you can hide the action bar at runtime by calling hide. Okay, that doesn't help because it's just hiding it after the fact. Using a logo instead of an icon. By default, the user uses your application icon in the action bar as specified by the icon attribute in the application element. However, if you also specify the logo attribute, then the logo will be used instead of the icon. So I'm assuming that inside the XML file of the that can control the action bar, there's an option to specify whether you want it to display the logo or not. onCreate options menu method. Inflate the menu resources. Have you tried to intercept the onCreate options menu?
I have not tried to intercept that.
Okay. So the question is, when is this called? I mean, if this is called before onCreate and before the action bar is visible, then you have a chance to intercept it and say, okay, I don't want to display the logo. So that will be one option you can try. Okay, let me see if I can just take a quick look at this one. onCreate options menu initializes the content of the activity's standard options menu. You should place your menu items into menu. This is called only once, the first time the options menu is displayed. Okay. To update the menu every time it is displayed, see prepare options menu. The default implementation populates the menu with standard system menu items. These are placed in category system groups so that they will be correctly ordered with the application defined menu items. You can safely hold on to a menu, making modifications to it as desired until the next time onCreate options menu is called. When you add items to the menu, you can implement the activities on options item selected method to handle them there. And then this panel menu. I would I would give this one a try and see if you can intercept it here, because it seems like this is a call that is actually happening first before the action bar is displayed.
Well, I noticed that when the activity is first displayed, the menu is not there. It has not been rendered.
Okay. So this one probably would not intercept it in time either.
Yeah. Well, this wasn't. I intended this should be a quick discussion.
Well, it's not a quick discussion because it still relates to what we were talking about. Because I didn't know whether you have fragments or not, so I was talking about fragments first. It cannot have anything to do with fragments because fragments are created much later in those stages. But it is still related because it has to do with the startup sequence of an activity when the action bar is actually created and displayed in the process.
And it just seems like through code there is no way of doing it. I may have to be
using XML.
Go through XML.
Yep.
Preset it there.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way.
I'm just a little surprised that you're not given the chance to even do anything before it is displayed.
Could you scroll back up a little bit?
Sure.
I think the solution is right there. Action bar activity class.
Say again?
Because the superclass by default created, it's the name of the activity extended action bar activity. If you change it to just activity, that might disable the action bar showing up.
Okay. When using the support library, you can add the action bar to the top of your activity window by extending action bar activity, the action bar activity class, and setting the activity's theme to theme.app.compat or similar theme.
I think this was created in the menu, and then when you inject the code to hide it, that will hide. So when you extend that, it will display the action bar, and then when you give it the order to hide it, it will hide. But if you extend activity instead of action bar activity, that might do it.
Okay, I see. So in your application, was it using the activity bar action bar activity as a superclass, or was it using activity as a superclass for main activity itself?
Main activity is using extends activity.
Yeah, so it's just extending activity itself. Okay, by default, the action bar shows the application icon on the left, followed by the activity title. If your activity has an options menu, you can make select items accessible directly from the action bar as action items. Blah 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 blah. Okay, but this is the sentence that is relevant to what you're trying to do. Is by default it does that, but when it says by default, it means there's a way to change that, right? Okay, layout parameters. Okay, so let's right click on that one. Action bar tab. Show custom if one has been set. Okay, let's right click that one too. Okay, these are all a part of the API. Okay, this one is still done on create, which is too late already. I'm trying to look for the XML specification for the action bar. Nope, it's not specified. Doesn't look like it's specified here. Looks like you have to find out, which part of the XML files or which XML file is controlling the attributes of the action bar.
I think it's for my activity main.
Is it in your main layout?
But it's not specified, so I think by default it is not. There is nothing there in advance. You have to add the parameter or add it to override it.
I think I did a search a little bit earlier on action bar attributes, and we'll just add XML to it. Action bar layout parameter. Yeah, that's just where you want to put it. Nope, that's not it.
Under action bar,
Oops.
they had an example of where to put it in your XML. So the first result in the Google search.
This one?
Yeah. It was like an envoy through. There you go. Android colon icon.
And this one?
So.
And that one is controlling the icon of one single item. But it's definitely is related into it's definitely inside the action bar menu.
Is it in the Android manifest? There's a Android icon there.
But I think that applies to the icon of the
Yeah.
when you first start the activity inside your tray, that's the control. It's controlling that particular icon, and not the icon in the action bar. Nope, that's it. So that is not it. Okay, styling the action bar. Looks like it's inside the theme, because the theme can affect the background color too. So in this case, this XML file controls the background color. So style is my action bar, and here's the theme. Text color. So you probably want to look into themes inside the values, or if there's none defined, that's something that you might need to define too. Yep. For Android 3.0 and higher, it seems like everything is inside the themes XML file, and if it's an okay, so in both versions, action bar style generator. There we go. This is just a preview.
Yeah, and that doesn't look like the icon / logo is a part of that.
Nope. Doesn't look like this is interactive either. Yeah, but I think the answer to your question is going to be in an XML file. The question is which one and how do you specify that particular XML file?
I have not seen any proof, but I think if I stuff the Android logo, Android icon into the activity part of the manifest, as a subpart of application, it may work, though I've not tried it yet.
Because you want to get rid of this, right?
Yeah.
That's what you want to get rid of. If you specify an icon that is empty, basically it's just a, null type of icon, that might achieve the same result too. So that if you can just specify what this is, because you can just specify it to be an empty file or an empty bitmap, and that will accomplish what you want to do.
But wouldn't that affect your icon or the launching icon?
That's why I was thinking of putting it in the activity portion instead of the application portion, because it's tiered. It is manifest, application, activity.
Right.
And if I step in the activity, it shouldn't affect the launcher icon.
Right. Cool. Any other questions? I mean, did anyone do anything over the break?
You don't have much to talk about today, do you?
No, I don't. No, I was actually ready to move on, and then one of the servers that I was managing, decided not to work. I can show you what was not working and that was taking up a lot of my time last night that I had earmarked for this class. Nope.
You can't connect to a database?
Well, but the database is running. That's the mysterious part. This website has been running for a while, and the database has been working for a while. Same version, everything is working. And then last night, one of the professors contacted me and she said, well, my class is depending on this website, and she needed this website to be up and running, and I was going like, okay, well, I can take a look. And then of course, 3 hours later, we're still getting this screen. I just could not figure out, at this point yet, how to fix that problem. But that took up a lot of my time.
Staring at the screen right here.
Probably staring at the config.php file going, what is wrong?
Yep, config.php. But not only that, I was testing individually. I was able to make the connection using the command line command, but the script was not able to make that connection. So I'll fix that problem later.
Did you have a backup from previously?
I have the backup of the database, so I could actually see the entire database is still there, but the connection could not be made. So inside the PHP script, when I tried to make a connection to the database, it's not making that connection. It has to do with, well, this part is kind of related to Android too. If I would say it applies to Android programming even more so than PHP. Part of the problem of that website is the content requires me to lock down the version of Moodle. And that's running like Moodle 1.8, which is a really early version of Moodle by today's standard. But because Moodle 1.8 only works with a certain version of PHP, I have to lock that down as well.
What is the server running as an operating system?
It's running Linux.
Is it running SID?
It's running mostly SID, but certain things I have to pull from Wheezy and also before. So as far as PHP and Apache is concerned, it's pulling those from the Squeeze distribution.
No, you need to. Yeah.
But there's no way for me to upgrade. If I upgrade anything, it's going to break Moodle because because the Moodle code 1.8 of Moodle depends on the new versions of PHP will break it.
Yeah,
There's no backward compatibility as far as that is concerned.
Why can't you well, you say the content of the site.
Yep.
But what content is specifically locking down Moodles? Because that's the problem. Let's be honest. That's the problem. Something's broken because you're using SID and you're running packages from Squeeze, and like in that amalgamation of stuff that you've got running, there's something not working, and the only real solution is to pull everything up to the most current version and see if the problem still exists.
Right, because but that means I have to upgrade Moodle to 2 point something, right? But the problem with upgrading Moodle is I'm writing a script on top of the Moodle scripts to massage the output of Moodle so that the output becomes more user friendly. So it's gonna break that part, and then downstream from there on, everything will be broken too.
Well, can you pull the image of the server and the database into a virtual machine and test it?
It is already running as a virtual machine.
Can you pull the virtual machine and test it outside of like live?
Not on a non-production.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can probably do that.
But I bet that's what it is.
Yeah, but relating back to Android programming, this is something that you guys will have to deal with too. Even more so with Android programming. In a way, it's better. In a way, it's worse because I think Android did a pretty good job maintaining backward compatibility. Okay, old stuff still works on a new device with a new version of Android. It just doesn't look right? But it's still functional. With PHP, it's not the same thing. If you use PHP 5.3 point something, everything is working. You upgrade to 5.5 point something, and then things will start not to work. I mean, it's not just deprecated; it is not supported. Yep.
I could think of another operating system where things from the 90s still work on it. We saw how that worked out.
Which one?
Microsoft Windows.
Sure.
With their mobile platform though, like as soon as the new thing comes out, like it breaks everything. And,
Yeah.
like, they're using completely different libraries and
But
structures.
I wonder when Android is going to drop off backward compatibility to 3. Because it eventually is going to cause
Yeah,
problems.
because 2.2 is like pretty old now.
Now, what I really want to move on, before I had the 3-hour adventure last night that is still ongoing right now, was to talk about Bluetooth connectivity using Android. I'm moving this one ahead of some of the other topics that I also want to talk about for one reason. Well, it's not because of my Fitbit. Okay, it's partially because of the Fitbit, but it's also because I think this is where things are going. I mean, I think there will be more and more Bluetooth devices that your Android device will be able to connect to, and I think this is more important because of that as a result.
You're talking about the Internet of Things.
Well, it's the internet networking things. I can see this coming because I have seen lighting control. You guys probably remember X10, the really old X10, thing. You plug in a special thing, on your outlet, or you convert your switch, to the X10 type, and it uses the power line, as a communication medium, so it can schedule lights to turn on and turn off and stuff like that. How many of you still remember that sort of thing? Not really? Okay. Okay, just imagine this. You go home and then you want to program your thermostat. Okay, so right now most houses have an older thermostat, so you have to walk up to the thermostat. Most are programmable already, but you do have to walk up to it. It has a really archaic LCD, type of user interface. You can do a certain thing, and then and it's really limited what you can do. Is that okay so far? What I'm seeing at Home Depot is they are starting to have thermostats that are Bluetooth enabled, and they let you use either an iPhone or an Android app to program it.
Not just thermostats. Home security systems. Like thermostats as well. Power outlets, lights too. Garage door openers. I mean, pretty much.
Wi-Fi as well.
Yeah, pretty much anything that's electronic.
Yep, they're either Wi-Fi enabled or they're Bluetooth enabled.
Because Wi-Fi has a little bit better range.
Well, they make
and also better security too.
Yeah.
Well, they make the garage door openers with the Bluetooth antenna that's up to 200 feet, so you can open with your phone. Going home.
Yeah, when it's 200 feet, you don't need a special Bluetooth device on your phone itself, because what it means is they have a better antenna and a better receiver on the garage door opener itself. So that's why I want to move on and talk about Bluetooth as a topic, and then after Bluetooth I want to talk about network connectivity as well, because if your app can talk to Bluetooth and your app can talk to networking in general, that will vastly expand what you can do with your app. As opposed to, we have all these cool devices that we can play with on the phone itself. If you can attach to other devices, that really kind of changes the whole thing, because now you can start to talk to other types of devices, and this is where things can actually happen to proprietors, people who are like you and me, trying to create something. You can't really compete with Samsung. You cannot compete with HTC, and say, I'm going to make my own Android phone or Android tablet. It takes a lot of capital equipment, and and it just cannot compete. On the other hand, if you think, well, I can make this one little thing, and I guess hundreds of people will buy it. I can still make money out of it. You can make it Bluetooth enabled, and then write the app to make use of it on a mobile device. Is that making any sense? Okay, so that's why I want to move on and talk about Bluetooth, but I didn't have the time to do it. But I do want to show you what can be done. Let me see if I can pull this up. Teak Enterprises. Okay. This really low resolution pictures, unfortunately.
Is this the guy you work for? Is this the guy you work for?
Yeah, this is the guy that I work for, and this is an older picture. What you're seeing here is, the title says it all. It's a smoking machine. So what does a smoking machine do? It smokes cigarettes. So what you see here, is this is a carousel. Okay, it doesn't really change it to a larger picture, but this is a carousel. So you load up the carousel potentially with cigarettes, and these are used, typically they use lab cigarettes, so they are very standardized in terms of components and also the length and also all of the other specifications. So using gravity, it will feed the cigarette into the loader. This part here is called the loader. So what the loader does is, it's kind of like a magazine. So what it does is it shifts and it lets one cigarette to drop into a slot. And once that happens, there's a pneumatic plunger from behind it. This is a pneumatic plunger. You can see the actual pneumatic line here. So there is a whole bunch of solenoids in the back here that can actuate the plunger. So the plunger will extend a rod to push the cigarette out into this part here, which is a carousel. And then the carousel, has basically a holder to hold, onto the cigarette. And then the stepper motor will turn the carousel to the next position, and you can load up the next one and then the next one. inside the enclosure here, there's a little lighter. You can actually see a little bit of the fragment here. It's a lighter. It's a filament. It heats up, and there's an air pump to basically do the puffing action. So this entire thing is an automated way to basically smoke cigarettes. And then the extraction, okay, there's a little kind of hose up here. There's a little pipe where you can feed the cigarette smoke to exposure chambers, okay? And in exposure chambers, usually would have rats or petri dish or some other animals to basically, they're not really testing mostly about the ill effects of cigarette smoke. They're using cigarette smoke to induce problems in animals, so they can later on test the effectiveness of drugs.
Like asthma. Like asthma.
Like asthma and all kinds of respiratory system problems. So that's what it is. Okay. The interface. This is the old interface here. It has this is the new one. I take it back. No, it's the old one. This is like a really, really old one. The new one has LEDs and a few switches. But with something like this, it is completely programmed in C. Okay, it's a fairly complicated program. You can change a lot of parameters, such as the lighter duty cycle. Because you don't want it to be too hot, it will just burn out the filament really fast. But you want it to be hot enough to light up the cigarettes. You can change the number of cigarettes to smoke. There are many things you can change. The user interface used to have its own 2-line by 20 LCD display and a few buttons to do all the programming. And you can kind of imagine how difficult it is to use a few buttons to control a lot of the parameters of the machine. The new one doesn't have, well, it still have buttons for certain purposes, like overriding certain operations during the operation, but to control the calibration and all of the other things, it's done by Bluetooth. And that's why I want to talk about Bluetooth on a mobile device, because this is where things are going. Another example, for those of you who took cisp362, is the Lego Mindstorms. Okay, so if you look at Lego Mindstorms Bluetooth.
Wow, so they're Bluetooth.
Sorry?
They're Bluetooth programmable now?
They always have been.
Oh.
Yep. Yep. The two brakes, the NXT is the quote unquote the older version. The new version is called the EV3, but they're both Bluetooth enabled. That's how you can remotely control a Lego Mindstorms robot using a desktop computer. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you want to, if you always require a USB cable to be tethered to run a robot, right? I mean, that's just not going to work very well. It has always been Bluetooth enabled, and that's why in the previous class when we used App Inventor, it actually had the necessary components to control a Lego Mindstorms robot. What else are Bluetooth enabled?
Phones?
No. But what is your phone connecting to that are Bluetooth enabled?
Headsets.
Go ahead.
Headsets.
Headsets. Okay. What else?
Fitness
Yep.
accessories.
Monitoring stuff.
Car
Yep.
stereo?
Car stereo but that's kind of like an extended headset. But it's for audio purposes. What
Well,
else?
they have some stereos that allow you to do Bluetooth connectivity for audio, but it's only on Android devices.
External GPS units.
External GPS units. Why would you want to have an external GPS unit when most devices already come with a GPS? Accuracy, response time, and also not to drain the battery of your mobile device, right? What else? What else are Bluetooth enabled that people might connect their phones to?
Smartwatch.
Smartwatch. Yep, that's a new thing.
Other people's phones.
Transferring
Celebrities especially, right? Okay. Samsung. I'll just look up the words here. I saw this a few times in
Galaxy Gear.
Yeah.
There's also Pebble, which is probably the most successful one. I think that's
Say again?
the Pebble.
The Pebble?
Yeah, I think it's like a Kickstarter. It was like one of the most successful like Kickstarter programs they had.
I thought the
Pebble watch.
Android, the Samsung smartwatches were using another system other than Android.
Like this one?
Yeah, I think it's like 526.
I can make and receive calls. You can read text messages.
I think that one can, but
The
no.
newest version.
Oh.
You can julienne fries as well.
Okay. Is it Bluetooth enabled?
Oh yeah. It's
Okay.
like a
Compatible with
screen.
Android and Apple.
Okay. Cool. To me, that's kind of more of a fashion statement than actually, functional. Because I don't think, the battery can last very long on a device like that. If it can, it would be great. But if this thing needs to be charged, as frequently as my phone, it's like
It's actually pretty good on batteries. My brother has it, and he like charges it like every couple of days. I think.
every couple of days.
It looks like it has an e-ink display.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that helps a lot.
From it is.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Having e-ink, display instead of the usual LCD or even OLED, that helps, to extend the battery life a lot.
They had some breakthrough in battery technology like 2 weeks ago. I remember reading about it where they charged a cell phone in like 18 seconds.
really fast.
It's not out for sale yet, but they're still working on it.
It's probably super dangerous.
The battery's like the size of a brick.
Yeah, I don't
Ooh,
remember.
I got another example of why you might want to have your why you might want to learn how to do Bluetooth programming on an Android or any type of mobile platform.
Medical devices.
Well, there are those, but I think with those, you have to get a lot of clearance first with the is it, no, well, the FCC is one, but then who oversees the medical stuff? FDA. Yep. So you have to deal with the FDA, and every time you have to deal with the FDA, you have to put up a lot of resources up front.
Only in the U.S. though.
Yes.
There's always the
car?
Hmm?
How about car?
Oh yeah.
Exactly. That's where I'm going.
What about the diagnostic?
No.
Parking.
Not the diagnostics. Say again.
Parking.
Parking. No. Who makes the most popular full electric car?
Tesla.
Tesla. That's it. Tesla. That is funny. Bluetooth problems.
so you can take a look at information of your from your car.
Well, you can. Well, I wouldn't drive the car through a Bluetooth
No, I mean like
interface.
feedback information specific.
You can get a lot of
Setting stuff.
exactly. You can get a log at least, of how much energy is used, the current charge state of your batteries, and the anticipated, mileage. Okay, how many more miles do you think your car can go? I mean, I know all of that information is available through the car itself as well. But as far as programming the car is concerned, I think most people would have a problem with, okay, let's update the car firmware again today, just so that you can get a different software package to display something. But if that information is downloaded onto your phone, hey, it's okay. I mean, it's a read-only operation.
Tablet mount.
You can get a tablet, or you can just get it connected to your phone. You can configure certain things like maybe set points of the temperature through a phone. Instead of using the dedicated interface. What else do you want to do with your with a Tesla? I mean, if you had a Tesla and you had a smartphone, what else do you want to do through your smartphone?
Remote detonation.
In case it is lost, right?
Just for fun, but
Put on YouTube.
I mean, if I had the money to buy a Tesla, that would be. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think they're great cars. I hear they're so quiet that.
You have to put beepers on it, so
Yeah.
the vision hearing can hear them.
Yeah.
Yep. But that happened with not only the Tesla, the Prius started with that problem, and Toyota for the longest time was dragging its feet until the Federation of the Blind was ready to sue Toyota for that.
For accessibility?
Yep, for not accessibility, but for warning that a car is coming.
So
Because
they all come with that now?
sorry,
They all come with that now?
I think so, but according to the Federation of the Blind, it is still too soft. It's not loud enough. They have to hook up maybe an external speaker that plays the rumbling sound of a Harley Davidson.
I've never
So you
seen
have a Prius that sounds like a Harley.
I've never seen a Prius with a beeper sound.
No, they're supposed to have it. I think it's just too soft, or most owners turn it off.
Well, you know what's funny is
But
if
it's
they,
required by law now.
if they put a speaker on it
Yeah.
and you have it playing like a Harley Davidson, I give it less than a day before someone modifies it to play the Imperial March.
Especially with a black Prius, right?
Right.
I mean, you have to match that color, like a matte or
Like a
satin
red.
black. Cannot be too glossy. But I think that's where things are going. I mean, using Bluetooth, as an interface. The other question is why choose Bluetooth when Wi-Fi is probably also available as an option? Power, that's it. Okay, we have an engineer in the class. Bluetooth by far uses less power compared to Wi-Fi, and as a result, if you don't need actual internet networking with a whole bunch of other computers, Bluetooth is usually a better choice from the perspective of power saving. Okay, if you do need like full network connectivity, like monitoring, maybe closed circuit cameras, IP cameras around your house, yes, you don't really have a choice, because in that case you need general networking to stream all the data in. Bluetooth cannot stream data that well. I mean, it's a very limited bandwidth. But when you want to just connect to a simple device and just to get a few bytes, a few hundred bytes, maybe a few kilobytes, Bluetooth is much less expensive compared to Wi-Fi when it comes to power consumption.
Especially after I think 4.0, right?
Yep, exactly. After version 4.0, Bluetooth low, it's called low energy.
Yeah, your phone didn't support that.
My phone did not support that. My other phone. Yeah, but it's called BLE. Marketed as Bluetooth Smart. Is a wireless personal area network technology, and its main feature is power consumption. Is power saving. Even after I use my Fitbit, it doesn't really increase power consumption at all. That I can actually tell.
That's really impressive. That's really impressive.
I think it partially is because of the application too. It doesn't really talk to the device until I open the app. So it doesn't really do anything in the background. But now that I turn on the background communication, it's still not draining much. I mean, it's for the most part, it's I could not tell that it's consuming any more than before. But this is where things are heading. I think Bluetooth can turn your Android device into basically a terminal for whatever thing you want to connect it to. Yep.
How many Bluetooth devices that are actively transferring content can you have in one location without them overlapping and causing errors on
That's a good question. I don't
same
know.
data?
Because as they
Does
become more
anyone
popular,
know?
What is it?
as they become more popular, I feel like the interference is going to be a problem.
What was the question?
The question is, how many cross-talking devices can you have, in one location before it starts to become a problem? In other words, let's say you have 5 people. Okay, each one has a Bluetooth-enabled cell phone, and then each one is talking to a different destination. Okay, like headsets. Okay, so what if the entire class here have Bluetooth-enabled headsets, and we're all yakking away on our headsets? Would it cause problems? Would there not be enough bandwidth?
Do they
for
use
that?
multiple channels or do they just use a single channel?
It's one single channel.
Hmm.
So it has its own way to do arbitration.
Well, the packets would have IDs on the.
Yeah, they must have IDs of the transmitter as well as the receiver, and they
but
can
the
resolve
waves would
it.
still hit each other eventually.
Right. So it boils down to see. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought with Bluetooth you cannot connect to multiple devices. It's either
Not from the perspective of software, but at the hardware level.
You're like there's many people around you, all with Bluetooth devices, all communicating actively with the device.
Have you ever been next to a microwave and tried to connect over Wi-Fi? Yeah.
Over a certain channel.
Similar thing. So like, you know, with multiple Bluetooth devices, the wave, the actual signal wave is going to bounce off or hit each other and cause interference.
Well, here it says Bluetooth uses some 9 channels within that their allocated bandwidth operating band. So and it hops 1600 times per second, so it's doing frequency hopping, I guess.
Oh, okay.
That would explain why it's so crappy right now.
Okay, the normal type of radio link used for general packets using a polling TDMA scheme to arbitrate access. Okay. This is starting to resemble, you know, what I usually do at home.
That's about a quarter of what my
I
tabs.
had to upgrade my girlfriend's RAM on her computer because she had over 200 Chrome tabs open. Don't tell me you're like that.
Yeah, Firefox for me normally is averaging 2.5 gigs.
Yep.
Up
She
to 3
maxed
gigs.
out 16 gigs of RAM.
But that's, you know, this is the other thing that tells me that desktop computers or whatever operating system you run on your desktop is irrelevant, because most of what you do is is done through a browser.
You should look into the extension tabs outliner. There's like a hierarchical tree thing. The tabs.
I probably would need it. Okay, time division multiple access is a channel access method for shared medium network. It allows several users to share the same frequency channel by dividing the signal into different time slots. So that's, you know, how it works. So in this case, I'm not sure what is the limitation, but it does use that scheme to arbitrate access. So there will be access between different hosts and their quote unquote, you know, connected devices.
But that would only be
The
for
no-
one device communicating with multiple devices.
Nope, this is for any host to any slave device communication.
So it just sees the other network access and
It
just
sees-
sort of
yeah.
finds, oh, there's a slot here, I'll
Yep,
get there.
yep. The chipset actually does that automatically.
So
Whether
basically
it is
you have to outpace the chipset.
Hmm?
Number of users would have to outpace the chipset, basically.
right, which also means, you know, if you have a special chipset, you will be able to sniff everything,
Right.
because, you know, it's all, you know, going to be, it's just time division.
You just need to know what time division algorithm is running.
It has a basic encryption in it, you know, but I think the encryption is so basic it is, you know, practically useless.
They actually make, I think, devices that can scan like a wide variety of them. I think that like all the frequency channels and like they can connect up to like 50 devices for like I think they're like under $70 or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think Bluetooth is intended as a secure type of communication at all. Now you can always implement your own encryption on top of Bluetooth, so you'll still end up with, you know, more better encrypted end-to-end communication. But if you just want to rely on Bluetooth itself, you know, if there's really, it's almost like open access. You know, there's
And
no.
just remembering, please input your 4-digit PIN. 0, 0, 0, 0.
Yep. But you can implement your own, you know, encryption stack on top of Bluetooth, so that would be the only way to make it more secure.
I think newer Bluetooth devices support up to like 8-digit pins now. But it's like, what if you essentially 2 to the power of 4 times?
Well, plus it's not, you know, that's just the pin. Once you get past the pin stage, you know, what about the actual communication itself? Is it, how encrypted is it? I know it's encrypted. I just know that it is not. I also know it's not going to be very secure. So we can probably look up on the same page here. Encryption. Nope. Security Manager Protocol. So it has a security. It doesn't say how strong the encryption is, but I don't think it's going to be very impressive. But what else do you want to use your Bluetooth to connect to from your smartphone? I mean, we can pretty much assume that in
Everything.
5 or 10 years, you know, everybody's going to have a Bluetooth-enabled personal device. Okay, you know, maybe it's not a cell phone, you know, but it will be Bluetooth-enabled, some kind of a tablet or a Google Glass.
What is general distance? Like 5 meters?
There are several classes. I think, you know, with the most practical class is only about 20 feet or so, maybe 10 meters, 10 yards. Yeah, 10 yards is the most frequently used one. But it's still good enough for most things, like a toaster. I'm not kidding, a toaster. Because I will bet you money right now that implementing a dial to control the toastedness of your toasts is more expensive than a Bluetooth chipset in the toaster.
Well,
I'll
and
bet you money
software.
right now. Okay, the control circuit to control, the toast, to control the toaster, the mechanical slash electrical, method of controlling that is actually more expensive compared to the electronically.
While you're at it, just make a matrix of heating elements and have a printer.
Or be able to control the temperature well enough that you can also solder using your toaster.
So the
Wave soldering, just turn it sideways and insert your circuit board. Yep, go ahead.
So the security, it uses the Safer Plus block cipher.
Is there any assessment of the encryption scheme? Because I don't think it's very secure. I think Bluetooth.
It's a custom algorithm based on Safer Plus.
Okay.
So I mean, not very. I mean, I'm looking at the thing right now. It doesn't look like
It's
very-
also intended to be low power, so I don't think they can afford, at least in the past when the standard was drawn, it cannot afford, to have strong encryption because of that.
I think I pulled up one of the PowerPoints or PDFs from like 1999, back when it was in its infancy. It was talking about security, pin-related security, and I'm like, oh, that's not good.
Nope, not good at all. But it's okay for toasters. So
Well-
even if someone hacks into your toaster, you just
start a
end up
fire.
with, huh?
You can start a fire.
You can start a fire.
Just
Well,
like tell it to heat up.
Well, each host device, right,
Mm-hmm.
has to, like, in order for devices to communicate, they all have to share similar keys, right? Because the host device, whenever it connects to a slave, that slave has to have a key so that it knows that it can talk to the host. So that means that all Bluetooth devices share. That makes it severely insecure, right? Because that means that every Bluetooth device has the quote-unquote public key for every other Bluetooth device.
Not really. I mean, if you think about SSH connections, it's the same way. To make the initial connection, you just need, like a very simple encryption. But once you once you establish authentication, you can also exchange, key pair, and at that point you can use, encryption pretty much as strong as you want to.
So you're looking at how the packets themselves are encrypted, though.
Yeah, the packets they don't even have to be encrypted like TCP/IP packets, right? The packet themselves do not need to be encrypted. It's the connection that has to be encrypted from point to point. Yep, end to end.
Speaking of networked toasters, there's also the growing trend of like places like in China putting Trojans and malware into smart devices,
Like your digital cameras.
cameras, refrigerators, toasters. Yeah.
Yep.
That's been a problem on a lot of the networking in computers, right? For a long time.
But it's becoming more and more.
Prevalent.
Yeah, because we don't usually have that many, electronic devices. Like 10 years ago, most people have maybe a digital camera, very primitive, smartphone, and that's about it. But these days, almost just about everything is USB enabled or Bluetooth enabled or whatever. So they just have to find a way, through one of these devices to, inject, some malicious code into a PC and start, hacking that way. So I think there are reasons for more concern. But getting back to Android, what else do you want to be Bluetooth enabled? Because toasters, I mean, if you think about a toaster, how much do you pay for a toaster at Target? $20, $30? Yep.
Bluetooth lights.
Lights.
Yeah. So you can just
Light
go in
control.
and have the lights come on in proximity.
Yep. It makes sense. Toasters, refrigerators. I mean, refrigerators definitely make sense because fridges are expensive, and there are things that you can customize too. Like temperature and thawing cycles and stuff like that.
Do you think most people would want to adjust their refrigerator temperature through their phone instead of just flipping the knob in the fridge?
You might want to keep track of other things too, like the temperature profile, to see whether your refrigerator is about to go, go dead. There are mechanical issues with the refrigerator, especially when you have the more fancy refrigerators. There are mechanical stuff that can break inside the refrigerator that can cause major issues. Ice makers inside the refrigerator that can break as well. I mean, you can have the ice freezing. So having a Bluetooth device can definitely be useful because there you can monitor temperature changes at different parts of a refrigerator and spot problems early on. Time to change that water filter inside the refrigerator. I mean, your cell phone can intercept, can get that information, and you can click yes, and it can automatically place an order for another pack of the filter. But why not put a device onto each, like why not put a screen on a refrigerator, on your toaster, on your toaster oven, on your range?
Expensive.
One, it's expensive, and two, who's going to maintain all that code?
Not me.
Exactly. But if you have most of the code actually on the mobile device itself, you have to update your Android operating system anyway, just so that you have to stay up to date with that device. So you might as well just use the same device to connect to all the appliances that you want to have access to. Is that making any sense? Bicycles. Bicycles.
Well, I think I'm going to track like how many miles.
I mean, okay, how many people used to have a bicycle and you were thinking about getting a bicycle computer so you can actually see how fast you're going, how fast you're paddling and stuff like that?
At one time.
At one time, they used to sell those things for how much money? They were expensive.
I know, it was like 2008, I looked, and it was like $30.
Yeah. Yeah, they used to be $30, but what they can do is really, really limited. But now, if you can just hook up the sensor, the spoke magnet thing, that's basically the only thing that you have to install to keep track of, how fast the wheels are turning, and you can have another one on your crankshaft, so you can monitor how fast you're paddling. But then hook up both of those things to a Bluetooth device, and the energy consumption is so low, you can probably just use solar panel to charge that thing. You just have a small capacity battery, so you don't have to recharge your bike computer or change the battery, and you just have to hook up to your cell phone. Then you can use your cell phone as your main display, or if you want to display it, or you can go through your headset and just say hello Google, what is my current speed? Is that making any sense? So that's why this is going to be our next topic. I'm sorry that I did not have time to finish it first, but I think this is important. I think it is, in some ways, it is more important than some of the other topics that we have talked about, or even the device resources like compass, accelerometer, and stuff like that. This is going to be more important in the long run. Yep.
I saw an interesting thing you could buy yesterday. It's a doorbell ringer, and it rings your phone, and so no matter where you're at in the world, you can talk to the person at your front door.
I've seen that.
That's kind of cool.
But it makes sense too. In many, many ways it makes sense. How about your safe? Like a safe that you keep at home to keep valuable items and whatnot. I mean, that can be Bluetooth enabled.
I wouldn't trust that.
Well, if anyone is going to go through all the trouble to unlock it, that person still has to be physically next to the box to get that stuff, right? So I would say it's okay to have it Bluetooth enabled. But that's what we're looking at. I think that's going to be one of the things that I think will be kind of important. It wasn't like that. If you think back just 2 or 3 years, there are a very limited number of things that are Bluetooth connectable that you want to connect to. But these days, the number of those things is just exploding. And most of those things are just using your phone as a dumb terminal. It's like, okay, display the knob or the sliders or the text entries here, but everything is actually just being done through Bluetooth, and the work is actually done remotely. Right.
And it's a lot more scalable, I imagine, because you just have to make the software, put in some parameters of like what the max and min are, and like instead of having like 5 potentiometers for like everything, right?
Exactly, it's less expensive. People do things only because it makes sense, right? But if you think about a toaster with all the sliders and the actual controls,
You make like 1 million of them.
yep, because electronics is inexpensive, because it's just a wafer, and Bluetooth chipsets are so small, so tiny. You have a really good yield, on the wafer, and after you make like a gazillion of these things, the cost of each chip is almost none. The circuit board itself is the only part that can cost more than a Bluetooth chipset itself.
Yeah, to produce it, it's cheap. But what about licensing and stuff that you have to pay into?
But Bluetooth is not a proprietary protocol. Anyone can make it. So that means it's not it cannot be too expensive to get a chipset to communicate using Bluetooth.
I thought there were just some like proprietary algorithms in it that required it to be licensed.
I don't
In
know
order to
whether
produce
that's
it.
the case, but I would imagine it's not going to be too expensive. Even if that is the case, when you have like a massive amount of sales, using these on these devices, it will still be inexpensive. It'll be interesting to walk up to just about any device and just bring up a terminal for that device, like your microwave.
Actually, Bluetooth is a trademark.
It is trademarked, but it's not a proprietary type of. Okay, let's see. Just look up Bluetooth and licensing, and see.
The trademark's just the name of it.
I found the PDF, which is Bluetooth patent copyright license agreement. If you do just Bluetooth technology copyright, that's the first or the third.
Patent, or
Okay.
Yeah, patent copyright.
Global info that Bluetooth. Are there any patents or licensings involved? Yes, there are several patents and on different parts of the technology. Because of this, all licenses
Yeah.
will have a sign.
okay.
It's the third, like the PDF.
Oh, this one.
No. Yeah, my keywords were Bluetooth technology copyright, and then it gave me the.
Okay.
All licensees will have to sign a zero-cost license agreement to cover IP and they.
But the bottom line is the cost of a chipset, right?
Yeah.
These are not. Well, this is a single chip. Okay, it's RF system on the chip. Silicon on SoC is to buy 100 is $5. To buy 2,500 is $3. So it's still okay. I mean, that's expensive, but not too expensive.
Those are $3 a piece, right?
Yeah.
$3 a piece.
So
Yeah.
we'll look at
But for 5,000, it's quoting. You have to get a personal quote. But I think it will just go down in cost too. I mean, as more devices are Bluetooth enabled.
They're just silicon.
Hmm?
They're just silicon. There's
Yeah.
not like special material for antennas
No,
and stuff like that.
nothing too special. I mean, it's RF technology. Most of it is actually digital. It's only the RF portion that is kind of specialized. Cool.
Good thing for IP version 6.
Hmm?
wasn't around, we'd be able to put an IP on toasters and microwaves.
Well, with those things, energy is not a problem. They don't have to be energy conserving. But on your phone, on most other devices, conserving power can be important, can be useful.
Well, it should conserve power when possible because otherwise you're just wasting energy.
Mm-hmm.
I think all devices should at least have USB, so that if you wanna instead of Bluetooth dongle in it,
Mm-hmm.
I think all devices should have USB.
I think it is going that way too. I think most passenger cars will start to have a Bluetooth connectivity beyond just for entertainment purposes. I think diagnostics will be the next to go Bluetooth.
Diagnostic is already there.
Yeah, but right now I don't think the specification requires Bluetooth connectivity. It's just the ODB2.
Yeah. So basically, the one that exists right now, you just insert the OBD2 plug into your into the car.
Mm-hmm.
And it is USB. It is Bluetooth enabled. So basically, from your device,
Mm-hmm.
like in your office, it's just run diagnostics and find out what's going on. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be physically
Or reset the odometer.
yeah. Not all of them are able to. Like the newer cars, yes, you can reset it, but
Yep.
you have to have the software.
Yep, you have to have the software, and some manufacturers have really they lock everything down. With Volkswagen, they lock everything down, but some other manufacturers don't lock down things nearly as much. Yep.
Basically, it's just rewriting E properly.
Well, it's useful too because you can check a lot of things using there's a lot of information available because if your car can collect information about how much and basically how much you use your brakes, it can probably predict how much material is still left. So it can probably tell you, okay, it's time to send your car into the shop and check the brake pad material thickness. Yep.
That'd be kind of cool. I just have an interface that tells you maintenance schedules, maybe high temps, change out something, or maybe if it's pinging, it'll give you some guesses of what could it be.
Yep.
Can you also do things instead of read-only operations, you have it control maybe you put into what's it called high efficiency mode and just be able to on road trips.
Yep. So I'm just going to take a quick look here, at the Bluetooth. So the Bluetooth API can scan for Bluetooth devices, query the local Bluetooth adapter for paired Bluetooth devices, establish RF COM channels, connect to other devices through service discovery, transfer data to and from other devices, and manage multiple connections. Cool.
Well, I was wondering from the ODB2, from Bluetooth, can you actually do things other than read operations?
Oh, it's two-way.
Okay.
Yep,
So
ODB2 is a two-way communication.
Okay.
Because even if you buy a $40 or $30 device from, let's say, Kragen's or Harbor Freight, they will let you reset the code on the car already. They cannot. It's not a manufacturer-specific code. So, but you can scan the code and you can click a button and say, I want to clear it. That won't pass you. That won't let you pass smog. Because they can tell at a smog shop. They can tell that you have just reset it, and until the car's computer itself is reconvinced that it has cleared all the code, it will tell the smog shop that it doesn't have enough data to qualify to pass the smog test.
So yeah, basically the way it works is the car has monitors and it varies depending on the car. So if the monitor is ready, it will pass smog. I mean, it's ready to be tested.
Right.
If in California there is the new smog stations where all monitors need to be ready.
Yep.
And then very few of them still run the old system where one or two, depending on the year, can be not ready or fully passed.
Yep.
But if you clear the check engine light, they're all
They're all
They-
reset.
yeah,
they're all
reset.
they're all reset, but not qualified,
Yeah.
not valid.
Yeah, it will say not ready.
Yeah,
Clearly
but
off.
you cannot see it because your check engine light is actually off.
Yeah.
So most people will think, oh, I'm ready to go, and then they get the car to the smoke shop, and the smoke shop guy will say, go back, after driving at least 2 or 3, tank full of gas, because the car self monitors under different type of situations, like different speed, different load, and all kinds of stuff like that. So it has a gazillion monitors. Well, probably not a gazillion, but many monitors that has to clear. I did this with my Miata because I accidentally damaged my the mass air sensor. Yeah, so I accidentally damaged that part. I had to replace it, and I had to clear the code. And then when I sent it to the smoke shop, they said, okay, come back, after running at least 2 tankfuls of gas. And I went back and it's not done. And then they drove another 2 tankful, it's not done. As it turned out, there's a procedure to follow,
Well, driver's side,
Yeah. So you have to drive at different speed, at a different at certain RPMs for a certain period of time, and then you have to accelerate hard, to a certain speed, maintain that speed for a certain amount of time. I found that list from somebody, and then there was no road in, Sacramento that I can actually control the speed the way I want it. So I had to drive on the levee. There are some levees, heading down, from West Sacramento, all the way down to the Delta. So most of the time there are not too many cars, and very few people would drive there. So I just followed that list, and that cleared the code.
And how-
was it a 5-speed?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it more difficult. Because you have to maintain less than 3,000 RPM at all times, and when you start the car, the coolant needs to show 0 degrees. So basically, the difference between the ambient temperature and the motor temperature needs to be significant. And then you have to run it for 5 minutes. That says 3 monitors already if you run it for 5 minutes idle. And then once you drive it, you have to be on 30 miles an hour or less than 30, between 25 and 30, and then your RPM should not go past 3,000 at all times. And then after that, you go to 40 for about 5-10 minutes, and then after that, don't go past 60. When you have a stick shift, you definitely run into the risk of running it past the 3,000 or below the 1,500 path.
Yep.
So that's
Then how would you normally, under normal usage, meet those criterias?
I think
for
over
checking?
time, you can do all of that stuff. It's just that you cannot expect to get it done with like driving it for 500 miles.
I get it done for 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
Right, but that's because you already know
Yeah.
what it is looking for, but not knowing what it's looking for, which is the case of most consumers. Once they reset the code using an ODB2 device, some can go for 1,000 miles and it would not clear all the monitors.
Yeah.
Depends on your driving habits.
Depends on your driving habit, and also whether you're driving the conditions the way you drive in. You even allow that condition to happen because it may not happen at all. I mean, maybe the way you drive or what you do with your car just does not trigger certain types of conditions to clear some of the monitors. So the answer to your question is, well, I guess some people after they reset the code, they would have no idea why it is not ready for smogging for possibly weeks, if not more.
So it's preset from the factory within yes, this is okay, but when you reset it, you have to meet all the criterias in order to, okay.
Yep. Yep. And they don't spell it out. There's nothing on the surface manual of the car, or even most mechanics cannot tell you that information. They don't even know about that information. Small shops know something, but they usually don't tell you all the details. They just say that, okay, look it up, find out what you need to do.
Yeah, because by law they can't give you advice. Seriously, by law they cannot tell you what to do or not. Even if they know what the problem is, they cannot tell you what the problem is. That's
What?
by law. That's the bar requires.
It's like, how are you gonna fix it
Bureau
then?
of Automotive something.
It's like you figure it out.
Why can't they tell you?
No, it has to do with the separation of smog
Yes.
testing
Yes.
as opposed to fixing the car.
Yes.
Because they don't want the same people to be doing both, because then they can run the racket, right? I mean,
Yeah.
At least they can tell you what's wrong so you get it fixed, right?
They just tell you that is not passing or the monitor is not clearing. They can't even test your car in that case. They won't charge you money in most cases because they just hook up the ODB2 connector and then it just says not ready. Okay, come back in a few weeks. That's all they're gonna tell you.
Yeah,
Well, they wouldn't want to tell you either because they're going to make more money.
Say again?
They wouldn't want to tell you either because they're going to make more
I think by
money.
law, if they cannot run the test, they cannot charge you money. Because you can't even run, they won't even put you on the rig to run the test because the computer would just tell the smoke shop, this car is not ready. Some of the monitors have not cleared. But having a Bluetooth connection can be helpful because now it can prompt you, how to drive your car. Next, you need to accelerate to 40 miles per hour slowly.
So that sequence that you go through, that's for all the monitors or just for a certain one or two?
Every single one of them will have to meet certain criteria to get ready.
So the one you just explained, what was that one for?
That's the secondary air pump. That's for the 5-minute idle. Some oxygen sensors monitors will set in those 5 minutes. But the most difficult one to get ready is the EVAP monitor. And that one you have to decelerate without touching the brake pedal from 50 miles an hour to 0 pretty much. And then there is a couple more that you get when you're driving at 50, 60 miles an hour. So yeah, every monitor has certain conditions. If you don't produce it long enough, it will not fit the monitor.
How do you know so much about this?
That is
Uh,
For work or just for your friends?
no, at some point I had to shop.
There's a lot of inside information. All right, so any other questions? So this is what we'll do on Wednesday, is to talk about Bluetooth. The simulator may not be very helpful because I don't think the simulator has any type of Bluetooth ability to simulate, Bluetooth communication. So when we get to this part, we'll probably have to start to use, actual devices, and but I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be, useful.
Is the interface pretty standardized? Like if I have like a Bluetooth receiver and like I have a Bluetooth, phone, like if I want them to communicate like certain messages or do certain things, like is it?
I think that's
pretty
doable.
standardized?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Because any Bluetooth dongle can be acting as a host, but also as a device that you connect to.
Okay, is it pretty fun? Just because you go to Fry's, get like a dongle for like $10 or something.
Yeah, the dongles are very inexpensive now. I mean, the USB dongles are very inexpensive.
It'd be fun to just play with it.
Yep, it'll be fun to play with it, but at the same time, you can also test out things. Because what you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to make this device XYZ. In the end, but instead of finishing device XYZ first, and then so you can test your Android application, you can make a simulator on the PC. So the PC is just emulating, at least just for the communication part, and then you can debug at least that part using a regular PC instead of the special device that you're making. All right, I'm gonna stop the recorder. Should have stopped it some time ago.
I didn't even know it was still on.